Welcome, everybody. Give us a couple minutes while everybody starts coming in. Thank you, Jason, out there. Hold it down. Appreciate you. A wild few days here. Wild few days. Seconds here before we begin. Everybody, make sure you smash that like. Good to see everybody in here. Rolling in. Nice to see everybody. Get ready for the good times. Come on. Nice. Yeah, tonight we're covering Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. We're covering the book and the movie. You know, I get it. In life, we don't have a name. But in death, we get a name. His name was Robert Paulson. His name is 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 Robert Paulson. This is my world, and those ancient people are dead, he says on page 124. So tonight we're covering Fight Club, the 1996 novel by Chuck Palahniuk, and of course the late 90s, 99 movie Fight Club. This is one of those movies. The movie is one of those movies that, you know, in 1999 there were a series of movies that came out that were really revelatory for the current age, especially Eyes Wide Shut, The Ninth Gate. I just rewatched The Ninth Gate the other day. I'll probably be covering that in the future. And, of course, Fight Club, a bunch of others. And what I really found about reading the book, what we're going to cover in the book, is that even though the book concerns itself with the 90s and really is at the time was seen as a kind of backlash against consumerist culture, it's really much more than that. And it's actually applicable to now much more than it was in the 90s, which is why it's pretty highly revelatory and extremely relevant. So, Fight Club, 1996, Chuck Palahniuk. I told you before that I got to meet Chuck Palahniuk one time, very briefly, and that was when I was at the Galway Literary Festival in Ireland in 2006, and that was when he read sections of Fight Club, but he read his entire short story Guts, and it was a wild experience. I've never been to a reading quite like that before, because he gave a warning beforehand and said that every time he read that short story that people would inevitably get up and walk out. And I couldn't really understand. I hadn't read the story at the time, and I couldn't understand what he meant by that. How could anybody get up and walk out at a poetry or prose reading? And sure enough, people did. They got up and walked out. And and I mean, at one point, I even almost got. I mean, I was pretty uncomfortable in the seats, but you know, at the end of the story, I went, "Yo, that's crazy!" The power of literature to do that to people, to cause a visceral reaction, was pretty crazy. I learned something from that particular reading. I got to meet him really briefly afterwards at that literary festival. That was a great time. That's when I was living in Belfast, and I went with some friends to Galway. So Chuck Palahniuk is interesting because he is one of the crop of sort of pop authors that kind of came up in the 90s and has continued to publish since then pretty prolifically. I'll just be covering Fight Club, the book, and the movie tonight. I'm also going to discuss a little bit of Celine's Journey to the End of the Night as part of this, because I just read it, and it's interesting how, you know, this always happens with literature, that the literature works in this web, right? The T.S. Eliot landscape of literature, where things always kind of interrelate and come together and inform one another, almost like prerequisites for the next work. And so the obvious theme in Fight Club that people latch onto is nihilism. It seems like a nihilistic book, but it's something a little different than that. And the book is also, the movie does a pretty accurate job of depicting what's in the book. I would say that this is one of the rare examples where the both works kind of work on an even keel. Usually we have something where the book is far superior to the novel, right? That's almost always the case. Occasionally we get the book and the film. The book is almost always superior to the film version. Occasionally we get a film that outdoes the novel. In this one, they kind of work on a similar spectrum. It reminded me a lot of Cormac McCarthy's No Country for Old Men, not in terms of the themes really, but in terms of how the two works sort of interrelate. And that's because if you go back and watch my No Country for Old Men stream, the novel is specifically written in a cinematic style. It's quite different from other Cormac McCarthy works. And this one is certainly works cinematically on the page. So the big twist, spoiler, okay, if you haven't seen the film, the big and I can't imagine you haven't, but there might be people. So the big twist, spoiler, is that the main character, the Edward Norton character, and Tyler Durden, Zero Hedge Tyler Durden, are the same. This is a book and a film about D.I.D. But the novel makes that much clearer from the very beginning. It's not a mystery to be solved in the novel. We get clues for that in the film. And once you go back, and it's interesting once you go, because I haven't watched the movie in a few years, and when you go back and watch it and some time has passed, you really see it from the very beginning. And so I'll be talking about the novel and the film kind of as a sort of synthesis, both interchangeably. But I'll be referring to the text to discuss this. And what I think that the book is actually about is a kind of initiatory process in stages into the climactic end of postmodernism as an artistic era, as a societal era, at the dying edge of this sort of postmodern version of the Roman Empire. We're obviously in Gibbon decline and fall of the Roman Empire type, quasi era. We're obviously heading, in that direction, which is rot from the inside, and that's one of the motifs of the book is the rot from the inside, societal rot in terms of values, rot in terms of just appreciation of life, and rot in terms of what life, human life and what it means to people. And so that's what Fight Club is about. Obviously, there are motifs of a kind of fascism in Fight Club as far as like the accoutrement, the aesthetics of it go, the clothes they wear, some of the mentality that they have, but it's not quite that. It's not quite nihilism. It's not quite a political fascism. It's something slightly different than that. And so I would say that this is more of, again, an initiatory process, an initiation into the end result of civilization, heading towards a G reset. That's what the end of the book and the movie are clearly about. But it's not a top-down G reset like we see now. This is sort of a bottom-up. It's also obviously about the war on cubicle life and on the office. It's about a war on the self. And so we get this kind of system within the book where the question really is, for me, whether not only is Tyler Durden is real. He's not a figment of our imagination reading it, but he is an alter. And if that makes sense, that doesn't seem like it would make sense, but he is absolutely real for the purposes of the theme of the book and for the Edward Norton character, for the kind of nameless speaker in here. The speaker in the book also functions as a kind of Ralph Ellison invisible man. He's the sort of invisible man who makes himself visible through his alters, which is a great irony in the book. Because if he's an invisible character, invisible to family, to friends, he doesn't seem to have anybody. He's invisible to his coworkers, and he wants to be visible and to materialize by going to these self-help groups, which become this kind of alternate religion for him. He's trying to essentially find himself and find meaning in the world. But instead of going to, let's say, instead of going to a church service, he goes to self-help meetings in the basements of church services, in the basements of churches. And the New Age kind of what he calls in the book above and beyond, free and clear movements take him in some sort of Jungian sense within his own psyche. That's why he finds his power animal. He finds his spirit animal. He goes inside of a Platonic ice cave, a kind of planet Hoth within his own soul, and he finds that he is cold. He's kind of cold and barren and full of full of tunnels leading out to his altars. It's his altars that give him what is the sort of fictionalized form of meaning. But the question is whether the other characters are also altars. So, for instance, Marla, the Helena Bonham Carter figure in the film, or even Robert Paulson, or any of the army of people that arise in the Fight Club, the question is, are they also altars? And I don't think people often ask that. There's also questions about his sexuality in this, because he says in the book that he's in a love triangle with Tyler Durden. He says a kind of love triangle with Tyler Durden and Helena Bonham Carter. He says he wants Tyler, Tyler wants her, she wants him. And this is a very 90s kind of setup, but it kind of is more than that. It overrides any sense of his sexuality and ends up being something about the search for the soul. And he finds his soul in the mode of a dialectic between his bad angel and his sort of good angel Marla, but who's also damaged, and himself somewhere in the middle. He also, obviously, the point that comes out is creation through destruction. So actually, you find this much more in a rewatch of the movie, and certainly in the book, that Tyler pretty much explicitly states that they have none of the people have fathers. They are a generation of people raised by women, he says in the book. And that essentially it becomes a sort of radical militarized form of Satanism and I'm not saying that lightly just because it's something to throw in. I mean, he literally, everything that Tyler does in the book, and especially in the film, sort of point to this, because he kind of makes out that it's kind of it's almost a Levian form of non-theistic Satanism, if that's even a thing. I'm saying, maybe that's not a real thing. Maybe it's all actually theistic, and that's just a cover. But in terms of what the book is trying to express, that's probably what it is. I mean, he wants to create through destruction by destroying the current order, and what I found in the book that is not in the film is that the ties with, for instance, Bateman's character in the book American Psycho, which I've covered, are really similar. It's the characters, the protagonists of both this and American Psycho are being bombarded with this kind of corporate theology, which is, you find meaning in the things that you surround yourself. The IKEA furniture he mentions. I'd never heard of IKEA, by the way. When I first saw the film, I didn't know about it until I moved to Europe in the early 2000s. But IKEA furniture, everything's flimsy. All of the labels, that's where I'm wearing all my labels. Remember, Jizza Genius Liquid Source. You got to read the labels. I'm wearing all my labels here on my shirt. And so all of the labels, all of the flimsiness, all of the corporate structure, the corporate cosmology, the corporate theology that sort of is all encompassing in the 90s, but has moved to a maximum degree now that I don't think we could have ever foreseen just what it is now. I mean, in terms of the blandness. So for instance, think of it like this. The sort of full spectrum dominance of advertising, it was to be expected. Of course, we can continue to expect that even more so in the future. But what I don't think that he could have expected, what we could have expected, is the blandness of it, which verges on aesthetic terrorism. Which is, you remember during Karanka, where instead of ads in the 90s, where, for instance, you get faces and families, and then you obviously get political leanings and ads, and the thing you're watching gets broken up, and you can't really curate what you watch. You have to watch what's given to you, and that's fine. I mean, in fact, in a lot of ways, that's even better, because the more choice we have with stuff, like, the less people are finding how to differentiate amongst art, and they're just being, you get your art spoon-fed to you, man. Remember in The Doors? But the amazing thing is, like, when they started taking away faces in ads, so now you have cartoon versions of people, and everything in, especially big tech and everything else, it has a kind of goo goo gaga name, right? Moodle, right? Boo boo, goo goo, misa baba doopa doo boo, right? Everything is Jar Jar Binks. Everything is the interface of everything we see is infantilized, and then the faces start to disappear. So now we're not even people anymore. And I don't think that we could have foreseen that in the 90s to the extent that we see it now. Of course, it's going to continue, and it'll continue to be, Minority Report level advertising where the Neuralink or the optical lens will you'll be looking at a mountain and you'll have to swipe left or whatever to get rid of the ad for, your insurance company or whatever. But all that aside, the absolute destructive element within this, which is appealing in many ways. What Tyler stands for in many ways is obviously appealing. I mean, first of all, there's a pro masculinity aspect of this. There's the fact that the fellas are fighting. They're doing something that's almost Spartan. That's cool. They have a group. They belong to something. Everybody wants to belong to something. But it's the moment where we get the death of the name, the death of the self, and the death of the ego that really we start to go into obvious cult territory until eventually we realize as a reader that we are full on in a series of initiatory rites. So if you think about the movie, so should I give a brief overview for anybody who doesn't remember about what the story is about? Basically, we get this character played in the film by Edward Norton, who is an office worker I assume in the Pacific Northwest. And I say that because at one point he mentions mentions making a pitch for Microsoft within the book. And he feels rotten on the inside. He's got no teas. He's totally alone living in his cubicle pod apartment with his IKEA furniture, and he spends all of his time. It's funny in the movie because you go back and watch it, and he's on the phone ordering furniture rather than the internet still hasn't come quite into being yet. Internet's around, but they don't have internet order forms for like we do now. It's a different era. This is pre-Big Nine, right? And he starts going to self-help meetings because he is an insomniac, right? And he even goes to the doctor, and he tells the doctor that he's looking for Tuinol, Seconal, something, that'll just bomb him out because he wakes up in Milwaukee, he wakes up in Dallas, he wakes up in these places. Now, going back and rereading the book and rewatching the movie, you'll realize because there's been such a proliferation of D.I.D. literature and especially symbolism since then that you get the symbolism pretty quickly. The fact that he's waking up in places where he doesn't know where he is indicative not of insomnia but of dissociation. So yes, exactly, dial-up internet at the time. You've got mail. I know, everybody's heard it. But at the time, like when this came out, I was like 18 or 19, and I didn't care. At the time, I didn't care about the internet. I mean, I didn't care about it for a long, long time. I didn't spend the only reason that I got on AIM was to talk to my friends because it seemed like an interesting thing to do. We could already just talk on the phone. I mean, so we just kind of did it because it was interesting. But like the idea of like talking to strangers on the internet or like, even searching up stuff on the web was we just didn't do that. It was like that didn't become a normal thing for me until like 2007. So that I think that's a perspective that a lot of people who are born after that don't get. Even though it's kind of irrelevant now, it doesn't really matter. But he waking up in strange places and not knowing where you are and where you've been is indicative of dissociation, and so that's clued in the book when he talks to his doctor, and his doctor says we need to find the bigger, the larger problem here. And he should have listened to that's it's a form of sort of Chekhov's gun within the book, because we're going to find that his dissociation is so severe that he really is living. He's a night crawler, and he doesn't realize it until the two personalities fuse. So the reason that he lives in eternal darkness within the daylight, is that he doesn't know that he's not sleeping and awake. It's that he goes somewhere. He literally goes somewhere else. He travels to other cities not knowing that until he finds that the two characters fuse. But even then, he's created a whole world. One of the things is that he's created a whole world in his mind, and that we can't tell from an outside perspective whether these things are real or not. Like, what are we witnessing? Because all of the people, there's no reason, if we are in a first person perspective here, first person point of view with this protagonist in the book, we don't know about the unreliable narrator. We don't know that if this is factual or not. It's truthful that there are a bunch of people that populate his world by the end of the story, but we don't know whether it's we know that that's truthful, but we don't know whether it's factual or not. So these could all be a kind of one-man army, all against all, as he said in the drone warfare book, war of all against all, which is one of the things that we're sort of being driven to. And of course, this is an early sort of precursor of what's happening to society. I mean, the nut houses being opened up in the 80s and then finally leading to eventual open society craziness is obviously in full swing now. So eventually he starts going to these self-help groups, and he finds that he's going to groups that he's going to like brainworms survivors, cancer survivors, loss of loved ones. That's interesting also because we just saw that in Hereditary, that's where she tries to find meaning in Hereditary by going to the same type of group, right? Survivors group. And they all have a kind of a pseudo-religious mantra to them, which is different from, for instance, the stair step, with the steps levels of NA and AA, we obviously get a hierarchy and a system of trying to ground oneself and find order in life. But with these groups, it becomes something wholly different, because many of the groups that he goes to discuss chakras, centering yourself, finding yourself within your spirit animal. This is all sort of pseudo-religious language, right? Eventually, he comes across this character named Marla in the movie. She's played by Helena Bonham Carter. And Helena Bonham Carter is a love interest that starts to appear. Now, one reason why in the movie I don't think she's an alter is because one of the first scenes where she appears, you notice that she's standing over there at the coffee table getting coffee and donuts, and she goes to get free food. And the first time he talks to her, there's another guy who's walking towards her, sees him go up and talk to her. So he makes a pretty Chad move here. He goes up and talks to her. He's doing something that resembles being a man at this point in the film. And the other guy turns around and walks away. Now, the question is whether that guy is even not real or not. Maybe that guy was part of his personality that was walking away. But I don't think so within the film. Now, either that was a mistake in the film. I don't think it was a mistake on Fincher's part, but in the book, we don't really get that. We don't get that detail with that scene. So he does continuously state that he never sees the two of them at the same time. And I think that's indicative of the fact that the alters, that the woman sees the two, she never sees them at the same time, right? Because Tyler and Edward Norton are alters, but that she is real. So I think that she's probably real in the book and the film. But there's a good case to be made that even if she is a real person, she almost functions like a non-real person, like an entity that's kind of just materialized. So after that, she goes off and he kind of takes her, she takes him across the street. She walks into a laundromat, takes a bunch of clothes out of the laundromat, then goes and sells them. And then eventually, he drops her at home. And Edward Norton in the film has no sexual proclivities at all. He is totally within himself and locked up. It's only till his alpha, or rather his sigma alter, which is Tyler, kind of takes over, and they have a purely, almost animalistic relationship. But he finds himself in his ice cave at the center of his psyche, and that's interesting because when he meets up with Tyler on the airplane, he's praying that it'll crash so that he can just feel the sweet release of destruction and he'll be able to sleep. That's when he meets Tyler. Tyler is a film projectionist. All of the elements in the movie also point to a kind of psychic double because Tyler is a film projectionist and his job is basically to splice the movies together, and he's putting, subliminal messages in there and all this stuff, which is all about chaos. He's just creating a kind of chaos with no reason behind it until this gets focused later on with the Fight Club itself. But when they go to his new house on what's called Paper Street, this is interesting because it's like, are we supposed to assume that he has a house on paper, or that the condo that he had went up in flames like paper, or that everything is kind of ready to singe and burn like paper or like dust in the wind? It's also, when you look at the house in the book and the film, it's clearly an outer. This is in every book that we've covered. The house is clearly an outer symbol of his inner psyche. So it's broken down, it's rotted, it's full of stinking wood, there's nails everywhere. The electricity, the spark doesn't come on. You can't cut on all the lights at once. So the protagonist in this can't turn on all the lights on his psyche because, first of all, he wants to go to sleep because he's an insomniac because of his D.I.D, but also he can't fully get to know himself and expose his own mind because only one light comes on at a time, which is to say the altars. He also is frequently going into the basement, which is flooded and full of electrical sparks to try and get the house going back again, which is to say that he's rotted out from the bottom. He's drowning in his own basement filth, and that the sparks are almost able to penetrate the basement of his mind, but they can't quite get there. Eventually, all of the Fight Club will come into the house, and when you see the characters, like when you see Tyler Durden like riding the bike around the house and ringing the ding ding on his bicycle, it's almost like that's an infantilized scene of an adult riding a kid's bike through a house, doing childlike things because he's trying to access the memories of his own childhood. And a lot of what Tyler does is like the shenanigans of what a teenager would do. It's almost as if Edward Norton, or the protagonist in the book, has skipped growing up, and because of that, he's in stasis. So he can't find himself. He has no grounding. He has no order. He has no hierarchy. He has no friends. He has no family. He has nothing. And so instead of going outward to find things, he just kind of retreats to the inside. Eventually, Tyler and the protagonist go to they go to a bar, and when they walk outside, he gets roped into getting in a fight with Tyler. And so, yeah, so Tyler, what's interesting about this is really the first stage in the initiatory process within the film. So loosely stated, I would say that the initiation kind of goes like this. There's a singular person, and then there's a split. That's like stage one. There's a war on the self because the two alters fight each other. Then there's a war on other people because they start the Fight Club, and it's one-on-one. It's man against it's the protagonist, the speaker, against another person. Eventually, this is going to turn into the war of another person on you, because the next stage of the Fight Club is that they have to go out and recruit people, and they do that by making themselves victims and losing fights. Then we have a full recruit process where we have sort of all against all. Then we have the sacrifice of Bob, where we get identity and names. Then we get the war of man on society. Then we have self-sacrifice with the scene where he's driving the car and he drives off the cliff and he has to let go. That leads into ego death. He has to let go. And eventually this turns into all against all. And finally, it turns into destruction of the ego, destruction of the self, and back to a singular self. And that sort of 10th stage or 11th stage, that's more like the 11th stage. The 11th stage culminates in the reset in society and the destruction and the major cause of chaos, which will result in nothingness that will then bring about order out of it. Right. And this also coincides with the obvious Big Nine predictive programming at the end of the movie, where it's not laid out so much in the book. In the book, he's on top of it's in the book. It's interesting because it's more like he's on top of the Tower of Babel. He's standing on top of a skyscraper at the top of the world, but he can't go any further because he's just a man, and so he brings it all down himself into absolute rubble and dust, and it becomes nothing again. And from that will arise something else. Is sort of the initiation process within this. So, a couple of things about the book that I wanted to go into is that the language is really. I mean, the first few chapters are really the book. You can read the book, by the way, in less than 2 hours. It's a very fast read, and it's very good. And notice that he starts off. The first word in the book is Tyler, and the last line is, "We look forward to getting you back," almost as if Tyler is back, microcosm, macrocosm. But he says, "Tyler gets me a job as a waiter." This is how the book starts, not the film. "Tyler gets me a job as a waiter. After that, Tyler's pushing a gun in my mouth and saying the first step to eternal life is you have to die." For a long time, though, Tyler and I were best friends. People were always asking, did I know about Tyler Durden? The barrel of the gun pressed against the back of my throat, Tyler says, "We really won't die." With my tongue, I could feel the silencer holes we drilled into the barrel of the gun. Most of the noise a gunshot makes is expanding gases, and there's the tiny sonic boom a bullet makes because it travels so fast. This is pretty relevant now, isn't it? To make a silencer, you just drill holes in the barrel of the gun, a lot of holes. This lets the gas escape and slows the bullet to below the speed of sound. You drill the holes wrong, and the gun will blow off your head. This isn't really death, Tyler says. We'll be legend. We won't grow old. That ties in with this part on page 124 where he says, "This is my world, and those ancient people are dead." He wants to destroy everything. The book also, one of the motifs in the book is the destruction of art. We get that a little bit in the film, but the destruction of art within the book is much more prevalent. And that ties in certainly to what's happening with the protests in the Extinction Rebellion. We always have protests in art as a kind of forerunner for French Revolution style activity, but it becomes much more techno war than this. This becomes much more techno war than that. He says, "The building we're standing on won't be here in 10 minutes. You take a 98% concentrate of fuming nitric acid and add the acid to 3 times that amount of sulfuric acid. Do this in an ice bath. Then add glycerin drop by drop with an eyedropper. You have nitroglycerin." That's in the book. So he goes on to give, very specific details about how to create plastic explosives, how to bring down buildings, where to tie them on the structure, and all this stuff, which is kind of. You can see Chuck Palahniuk writing the book. Not that I'm going to talk about Chuck Palahniuk too much because it's the speaker doing this in the book, but you can see the speaker or Chuck Palahniuk writing this, tapping into this 90s thing, which was very prevalent at the time about the anarchist cookbook. Very popular back in the day. People used to mention it all the time. That's a sort of a precursor for the internet. The internet has just made all that kind of obsolete because it was everywhere. Let's see. On page, we get the first D.I.D. introduction on page 19, where, and he says that he even mentions the French Revolution. He says he wants Seek-and-alls, two-and-alls to go to sleep. The bruised old fruit way my face had collapsed. You would have thought I was dead. The doctor said if I wanted to see real pain, I should swing by a First Eucharist on a Tuesday night, see the brain parasites, see the degenerative bone diseases, the organic brain dysfunction, see the cancer patients getting by. So I went. The first group I went to, there were introductions. This is Alice, this is Brenda, this is Dover. Everyone smiles with that invisible gun to their head. I never give my real name at support groups, which is interesting because this book functions as almost a journal of extreme psychotherapy where he also never gives us his name. It's almost like he's everyone and no one. The little skeleton of a woman named Chloe with the seat of her pants hanging down, sad and empty. Chloe tells me the worst thing about her brain parasites was no one would have sex with her. Here she was so close to death that her life insurance policy had paid off with $75,000, and all Chloe wanted to do was get laid for the last time. Not intimacy, sex. She says, it says, all this dying had started with Chloe being a little tired, and now Chloe was too bored to go into treatment. During the French Revolution, Chloe told me, the women in prison, the duchesses, baronesses, marquises, whatever, they would screw any man who'd climb on top. Chloe breathed against my neck, climb on top, pony up. Did I know? Screwing past the time. La petite mort. The French called it the little death, right? The little death, how sex and death are tied in here together. Also, we get a kind of precursor for French Revolution style activities happening. Also, on page 23, we get the mirror. And it says, if the mirror holds, he looks into the mirror and he sees himself, but also he starts to see Tyler in the mirror, and he says, if the mirror holds. So one of the things that happens in the movie, we do have David Fincher's kind of grimy green palette in this, which he uses in all of his films. I've covered The Killer, which was, what's his name? Fassbender, and that's in the members section. I think I've covered a couple other Fincher movies. I can't remember, but I recently talked about Zodiac last night, not the film, but the real Zodiac as part of the Long Legs analysis. Get a membership and you can see that from last night. But one of the things that Fincher does is we see this. Fincher started off as an MTV music video director, and we see that a lot in his movies. How this sort of informs his movies. And one of the biggest ways is with this kind of, remember the old Tool videos? I mean, Fincher's movies kind of look like the Tool video for sober, or like they're just kind of grimy and green, because that's supposed to give us this rotted exterior for the emptiness of the inside of the narrator or the protagonist or speaker. But we also get these continuous scenes where the screen is shaking. And I think that was really well done in this. When you first watch it, you probably don't know what that means, or you think it's just a technique, especially if you were like 18 watching this back in the day. You thought that was just a cool technique for movies. But now, when you watch it, it obviously functions as his altar. His altar gets triggered in certain movements, and so then Tyler Durden appears. This is in moments of greatest stress, heightened stress, anxiety, and when he starts to feel like death is on the way. But when he's looking in the mirror, he says if the mirror holds, he can almost see himself. He, on pages 28 and 29, we really get something interesting where, in the movie, you remember he says, I am Robert Paulson's black lung. I am John's foot. I am, and he names the various organs and diseases that he has. Well, that's indicative of the fact that his life is becoming purely biological, leading down into a degradation and a loss of his heart rate until he just, decomposes from his human biological meat sack. It's very nihilistic in the book, and that's one of the reasons why the Fight Club itself is so appealing to him, because it's like fist on face, meat on bone. It's just something purely animalistic and biological. Not saying that it's the Fight Club itself is the bad thing. I'm just saying that the way that they do this. And then, but what we get in the book is something a little more complex and clever. So he goes from, I'll just read you this part. He says, the dark is hot from the bulbs inside the projectors and the alarm is ringing. Stand there between the two projectors with a lever in each hand and watch the corner of the screen. The second dot flashes, count to 5, switch one shutter closed. At the same time, open the other shutter. That paragraph right there is his dissociation. So the reason Tyler is a film projectionist is because that's the film of his own mind. He's seeing the film of his own mind pass by. And when the real passes, or the real has to be changed, that's his alter changing. Changeover. The movie goes on. The movie of life goes on. Hey, shouts out to Luchador 1764 right there, $5. He says, just got here. Have you covered Fight Club being about Skittles, guys, yet. If you haven't, it definitely unironically is. I disagree, but I have mentioned that as far as the protagonist goes. I do think that the protagonist is certainly either asexual or is Skittles because of the love triangle, which I just covered. But also there are obvious sort of Ernst Röhm elements in this that play into it. I don't think that that's what it's about, but I think that that's certainly one part of the interpretation of the whole. Thank you for that $5. Appreciate it. He says, nobody in the audience has any idea. The alarm is on the feed reel, so the movie projectionist can nap. A movie projectionist does a lot he's not supposed to. Not every projector has the alarm. At home, you'll wake up in your desk bed in your dark bed with terror. You've fallen asleep in the booth and missed a changeover. The audience will be cursing you. The audience, their movie dream is ruined, and the manager will be calling the union. You wake up at Crissy Field. The charm of traveling is everywhere. I go. You notice how he does something subtle here. He goes from talking about you as in the editorial, you as in the Big Lebowski, the dude, the editorial as in talking about everyone or one does, to actually talking in the second person. So he's talking to us, the reader, but he's also talking to himself. He's talking to his alter here. So he goes from first person to second person, and that's what he means by waking up at Crissy Field, waking up in different places. You wake up there. He doesn't say I wake up. He says you wake up there. The charm of traveling is everywhere I go. Tiny life. I go to the hotel, tiny soap, tiny shampoos. This is pretty predictive, isn't it? Tiny home, tiny house, tiny everything. Tiny home, right? Tiny home, tiny pod. Remember when the tiny home, the tiny house movement was so big, like 4 years ago? They really, it's still there, but that was really pushed. Obviously, that's part of, if you're gonna leave your city, right? If you're gonna get out of the cities, we want you to stay there and live in your pod. But if you're gonna get out, make sure you go live in a tiny house. At home, he says, fold into the standard airplane seat. You're a giant. The problem is your shoulders are too big. Your Alice in Wonderland legs are all of a sudden miles so long they touch the feet of the person in front of you. He's going down the rabbit hole here. Dinner arrives, a miniature do-it-yourself chicken cordon bleu hobby kit, sort of a put-it-together project to keep you busy. The pilot is turned on the seatbelt sign, and we would ask you to refrain from moving about the cabin. The way that the paragraphs move in this and change perspective shows that he's not himself. All the voices are part of his own voice that he's hearing, or like he's hearing them from down a tunnel. You wake up at Meg's Field, whatever that is. Sometimes Tyler wakes up in the dark, buzzing with the terror that he's missed a real change on the movie, or the movie has broken, or the movie has skipped just enough in the projector that the sprockets are punching a line of holes through the soundtrack. After a movie's been sprocket run, the light of the bulb shines through the soundtrack, and instead of talk, we're blasted with the helicopter blade sound of whop, whop, whop at each burst of light comes through the sprocket hole. What else a projectionist shouldn't do? Tyler makes slides out of the best single frames from a movie. We know all about that part. We wake up at Boeing Field. You wake up at Boeing Field. You wake up at LAX. We have an almost empty flight tonight, so feel free to fold the armchair rests up the seat backs and stretch out. You stretch out, zigzag, knees bent, waist bent, elbows bent across three or four seats. This is your life, and it's ending 1 minute at a time. You wake up at Cleveland Hopkins. You wake up at SeaTac. Again, you're a projectionist, and you're tired and angry, but mostly you're bored, so you start by taking a single frame that you've collected from some other projectionist, and you put that in there. That's chaos. That's one of the creepy, chaotic things that I don't like in the book and the movie. But I see what he's doing here, but I hate that about the movie. Tyler does this. He goes on to talk about how the names of all of the New Age groups have names which are, again, sort of quasi-religious or certainly New Age. Names like above and beyond, free and clear, they have to be the opposite of whatever the particular ailment they're going through is. He says on page 33, if I could wake up in a different place at a different time, could I wake up as a different person? I asked if Tyler was an artist. Tyler shrugged and showed me how the 5 standing logs were wider at the base. They're on the beach now. Tyler showed me the line he'd drawn in the sand and how he'd used the line to gauge the shadow cast by each log. He's making like a new structure, a log cabin on the beach that's hidden in the film. What Tyler has created was the shadow of a giant hand, only now the fingers were Nosferatu-like and the thumb was too short. But he said how at exactly 4:30 the hand was perfect. The giant shadow hand was perfect for 1 minute, and for one perfect minute, Tyler had sat in the palm of a perfection he created himself. You'd wake up and you're nowhere. 1 minute was enough, Tyler said. A person had to work hard for it, but a minute of perfection was worth the effort. A moment was the most you could ever expect from perfection. You wake up and that's enough. His name was Tyler Durden, and he was a movie projectionist with the union, and he was a banquet waiter at a hotel downtown, and he gave me his phone number, and this is how we met. So he's meeting his alter here. The house is the psychic symbol. Occurs on pages 56 and 57. It says, what's happening here? All night long, I dreamed I was humping Marla Singer. Marla Singer smoking her cigarette. That's his altar, right? Marla Singer rolling her eyes. I wake up alone in my own bed, and the door to Tyler's room is closed. The door to Tyler's room is never closed because the door in his mind, the door into the dark, as Seamus Heaney says, the door into the dark, into his other altar, is always open, except for in this one place when, just as the Super Chat just pointed out, his sort of sexuality is questioned here. The door on Tyler's room is never closed. All night it was raining. The shingles on the roof blister, buckle, curl, and the rain comes through and collects on top of the ceiling plaster and drips down through the light fixtures. When it's raining, we have to pull the fuses. You don't dare turn on the lights. The house that, see what I was talking about, lights? The house that Tyler rents, it has 3 stories and a basement. We carry around candles. It has pantries and screened sleeping porches and stained glass windows on the stairway landing. There are bay windows with window seats in the parlor. The baseboard moldings are carved and varnished and 18 inches high. The rain trickles down through the house, and everything wooden swells and shrinks. And the nails in everything wooden, the floors and baseboards and window casings, the nails inch out and rust. So he's obviously, that also ties into his trying to find sympathy, not even from other people, but into himself through how he's being barbed on the inside from his broken psyche, from his broken personality. The house is waiting for something, a zoning change or a will to come out of probate, and then it will be torn down. I asked Tyler how long he's been here, and he said about 6 weeks. Before the dawn of time, there was an owner who collected lifetime stacks of the National Geographic and Reader's Digest. Big, teetering stacks of magazines that get taller every time it rains. Tyler says the last tenant used to fold the glossy magazine pages for cocaine envelopes. There's no lock on the front door from when police or whoever kicked in the door. There's 9 layers of wallpaper swelling on the dining room walls. Flowers under stripes, under flowers, under birds, under grass cloth. You know, I just realized that this also kind of plays into how popular something like Jackass became, right? So, something like how popular that became, because one of the reasons for the guys who were doing Jackass is that, you know, there's certainly one thing about drug seeking, right, which is that the more injured they get, I'm not saying in the show, I'm just saying in general, the more injured they get, the more permanent the supply of perks or whatever is. But also, the film certainly kind of gives rise to that in many ways, right? Because the characters are constantly getting injured, but instead of having and they do kind of mention that in the book, but he's already tried to go to the medical establishment, and they obviously won't. They turned him away. The guy said, "Oh, you haven't slept for 1,000,000 days? Go chew on valerian root or whatever," which is whatever. But the fact that he finds meaning in medical groups, and it verges on kind of what we see in scientism now, doesn't it? Doesn't that make sense? So he says, let's see, moving on to, D.I.D. Oh yeah, this is the part about D.I.D. Page 62. It says, a lot of people wanted Marla dead. She told Tyler these people were already dead and on the other side, and at night they called on the telephone. Marla would go to bars and hear the bartender calling her name, and when she took the call, the line was dead. Tyler and Marla, they were up almost all night in the room next to mine. When Tyler woke up, Marla had disappeared back to the Regent Hotel. I tell Tyler Marla's singer doesn't need a lover, she needs a caseworker. Tyler says, don't call this love. Love story, long story short, now Marla's out to ruin another part of my life. Ever since college, I make friends, they get married, I lose friends, fine. Sort of incel behavior here. And Tyler asks if this is a big problem for me. I'm Joe's clenching bowels. No, I say, it's fine. Put a gun to my head and paint the wall with my brains. Just great. I say, really, just great. And then the chemical burn. The chemical burn occurs on pages, starting with chapter 9, pages 74 and 75. And the chemical burn is really interesting because this is the moment where the narrator or the speaker protagonist, his alter, is trying to bring him back down to his baseline by not passing out. It's the opposite of what he wanted at the beginning, which was to sleep, right? So if he can't be sent into sleep through the Fight Club, and he can't be sent into sleep through his constant activity with his alters, you would think that the pain would send him back to zero line, but it doesn't here. And he ends up getting a very Al Crowley shaped, obvious, or vaginal chemical burn on his hand, but it's a mark. It's a kind of mark of the beast in a way. I'm not saying it's a religious mark of the beast, but it kind of functions as the mark of the beast within himself. He calls it in the book, he calls it Tyler's kiss, which is certainly verging on both Skittles, Al Crowley, a kind of finding oneself through nihilistic ego death and physical death, death of emotion, death of the nerve endings. And it's pretty, I think it's pretty interesting. The whole aspect of the soap making in this is interesting because Tyler, so Tyler sells, he sells back to, Saks Fifth Avenue and Bloomingdale's or whatever, the big department stores, this really expensive organic soap that he makes with human fat and tallow. And I think that we're supposed to get a couple things out of that. First of all, it's a cover for the nitro base that he's making for his bombs. It also is a way to subvert the normal order of consumerism because these guys are at the bottom level and they're selling back to the top level the things that have been literally sucked out of their bodies. So they're selling their own bodies back to them. It's a kind of form of unintentional or unaware kind of meta cannibalism in this. It's also you also can't help but think of one of the things that so-called happened at that time in the middle of the 20th century using soap and lampshades, right? That's obviously one of the things, and I say that because I'm not saying that out of the blue. I'm saying it because it ties in with the black uniform that they wear. So they go from the Fight Club goes from being a kind of SA, right? A sort of Ernst Röhm type of verging on Skittles group of guys fighting at a sport organization or whatever, guys having a good time, into a full-scale paramilitary organization dressed in black. So these guys are Himmler people walking around, but they're instead of organized top-down corporate espionage, they're doing a sort of nihilistic, satanic, chaotic art destruction. But the two things kind of function as this, in the same way. But the point is, with all of that aside, that you can see in terms of their activities out in the wild, why these things are appealing to the loser in the movie who works in the cubicle at Cap One or whatever and is terrorized by his boss in his cornflower blue tie. There's a great scene here. There's a great scene. Let me try to find this. There's a great scene where, I found it. So the boss comes in and says, I found these copies of something in the copy machine. What is this? Where are my TPS reports? And the speaker here, who's not Tyler at this point, who's starting to converge with his Tyler alter, says something that's highly revelatory for now, and I'm just going to read it anyway, even though it's a thing here. So he says on page 97, I haven't slept in 3 days unless I'm sleeping now. My boss shakes the paper under my nose. What about it? He says, is this some little game I'm playing on company time? I'm paid for my full attention, not to waste time with little war games. And I'm not paid to abuse the copy machines. What about it? He shakes the paper under my nose. I love how he incorporates his dialogue into his paragraphs without quotation marks. It's only at specific times, which kind of delineates the characters. It's a lot like Don DeLeo and Cormac McCarthy. What would I do? The hole in my cheek, the blue-black swelling around my eyes, and the swollen red scar of Tyler's kiss, there he goes, on the back of my hand, a copy of a copy of a copy. Do you get it in that sentence? The circles within circles is the secrecy of Fight Club, which goes out into other chapters within society, so that all of the characters who work in the office buildings and in truck, they work in everything, as Tyler says. We make this country run, he says. All of those things end up being a kind of alternate mirror reflection of the way that top-down structure, the pyramid structure, works. It's the same thing. Leader, managerial class, unknown person, top of the pyramid, leaders, managerial class, workers, and so forth. But it's a kind of bottom-up reflection of those things. And also the copies within copies also it brings to mind the film projection unit. It brings to mind the alters within the narrator's mind. Why does Tyler want 10 copies of the Fight Club rules? What would I do? I say, what I would do, I say, is I'd be very careful who I talk to about that paper. I say, it sounds like some dangerous psychotic killer wrote this, and this button-down schizophrenic could probably go over the edge at any moment in the working day and stalk from office to office with an Armalite AR-180 carbine gas-operated semi-automatic. My boss just looks at me. The guy, I say, is probably at home every night with a little rat tail filing across into the tip of every one of his rounds. This way, when he shows up to work one morning and pumps around into his nagging, ineffectual, petty, whining, butt-sucking, candy-ass boss, that one round will split along the filed grooves and spread open the way a dum-dum bullet flowers inside you to blow a bushel load of your stinking guts out through your spine. Picture your gut chakra opening in a slow-motion explosion of sausage casing, small intestine. My boss takes a paper out from under my nose. Go ahead, I say, read some more. No, really, I say, it sounds fascinating. The work of a totally diseased mind. And I smile. The little buttonhole-looking edges of the hole in my cheek are the same blue-black as a dog's gums. The skin stretched tight across the swelling around my eyes feels varnished. My boss just looks at me. Let me help you, I say. I say the fourth rule of Fight Club is one fight at a time. My boss looks at the rules and then looks at me. I say the fifth rule is no shoes, no shirts in the fight. My boss looks at the rules and looks at me. Maybe I say this totally diseased fuck would use an Eagle Apache carbine because an Apache takes a 30-shot mag and only weighs 9 pounds. The Armalite only takes a 5-round magazine. With 30 shots, our totally fucked hero could go to the length of a mahogany row and take out every vice president with a cartridge left over from each director. Tyler's words coming out of my mouth. I used to be such a nice person. I look at my boss. My boss has blue, pale cornflower blue eyes. So he goes, it's a great scene in the film. That's all a quote from the book. Just for CYA, that's all a quote from the book. We also get the ego death and the identical twins on page 114 and 115. Let's see. Because he starts to talk about Tyler and himself as identical twins, and the ego death is the destruction of one into the other. Project Mayhem is in chapter 16. We haven't really mentioned Robert Paulson yet. We haven't mentioned Robert Paulson because Bob, or Meatloaf in the movie, Robert Paulson is I think somebody mentioned in the chat earlier, a kind of Baphomet figure. You know, he also, this is very relevant for now, right? Because Bob has been stricken with cancer. You know, that's all I'm going to say about that. But that happens, and then as a result, probably from something, and from that he starts to get, basically his T's start to go up so fast in his body that the estrogen has to keep up with it, and that he grows Baphomet parts. And Bob, also don't forget, Robert Paulson is also a former Alpha Chad bodybuilder in the thing, or that's the way he's described. So he's looking for a way out of his current tears, to find a way to live life again. And living life in Fight Club is that destruction brings life, right? So he can be his former self again. Eventually, he becomes the unintentional sacrifice by society, and then from that, the ego is dead, and they all get a name, and they all become him. This obviously reminds you of the Reichstag or any political movement with the sacrificial victim, who then the group takes on the identity of the people, of the sacrificed victim, and then, or the sacrificial person, and then they grow on into that and they become a unit without personal individual identity into a group. And that sort of also is mirrored with, of course, again, the narrator and the speaker and Tyler and his alters. The question again is whether those are all alters. I mean, maybe Robert Paulson is one of the narrator's alters, right? It could be. I mean, he's got high T with Tyler. He's got low T with Marla until Tyler takes over, and then eventually oh dang, oh, there comes a thunderstorm. Eventually he's lost, and he's obviously non-sexual in the book and the movie, so maybe that's Robert Paulson sort of taking over as a kind of synthesis between the two. Right. Project Mayhem, Kurt Boss makes a good point. The identity of Tyler is needed to cross over from loneliness to a group of emotions it feels. Yeah, it's a good point. Thank you, Kurt. Chapter 16, he talks about Project Mayhem. So eventually Fight Club becomes something more organized, and now they're all inside of the house, or inside of his psyche in a symbolic fashion. But by the way, everybody, please make sure you smash that like. If you would, please, if you're watching later on, or you're watching right now and you're not sub, give me a sub, hit that sub button. If you want to support, you can do that through super chats. I'll answer questions at the end, or if I see it while I'm coming up, I'll try to answer it as it comes up. And the best way to support is obviously through the direct links provided right here. Shouts out also to the mods, my mods, who are Jason. Got Jason in there. I got Jethro in there. Jethro was in here a second ago, I think. And there's Real John Connor right there. And thank you for dropping those links. You guys really appreciate that. If you want to support me, right? I mean, again, you can. I talked last night on the member stream. You can grab a membership also. I talked last night on the long legs analysis about the importance of reading. I don't often do that. It's not what I'm doing here. I'm not trying to get people to read. I'm read for you, or read because you have, or you haven't read the book, whatever. I'm just here talking. But, I think it's important to read. And you could, this is a good book for the fellas. This is a good book to read. It's a good book. It's very easy, very quick, and it's subtly complex. You can bang through it in about 2 hours. Right now I'm reading Nightmare Alley. I already covered a book by the writer of Nightmare Alley. I did the Houdini stream. That was like 2 years ago. So right now I'm doing my Nightmare Alley. It's going to be a sponsored stream that I'm going to cover. Also, I'll be doing Beast on Man stream coming up with The Gray, The Edge, and I'll probably throw Cujo in there from Stephen King. Why not? Yo, Luchador sends $5 and says, Tyler Durden flashing pics of, I'm not going to read that part in a movie theater analysis here. If you're getting to it, I'll wait. Yeah, I already stated I don't like that part. I don't even like reading that part. Thank you for the $5 super chat. I don't even like reading that part. That's my least favorite part of this whole thing. I think that's creepy, and I don't like that. I see why that's in I see why he put it in the book, because it's chaos on every level, and it's some sort of joke, but I don't find that funny at all. In the book and the movie. And also one of the deeper things is in that the reason he's doing that is that the movie, again, if the movie functions as if the film projection, which is interesting with the movie because it's film projection within film projection, functions as the movie of his own mind, then the infantilization aspects that I've covered also play into that. This is a kind of sick psychosis where if he has slept through or altered through his childhood because his brain has retreated as D.I.D, then it's common to go back to that kind of creepy activity, apparently, as we read about all the time. So that's what I think that means. Thank you for the super chat. Project Mayhem is where they start to develop real paramilitary hierarchy and structure. Project Mayhem says that arson is Monday, assault is Tuesday, mischief is Wednesday, misinfo is Thursday, organized chaos. They call it, there's organized chaos and the bureaucracy of anarchy. Now, notice the oxymoron in those two things. Notice the oxymoronic aspect of organized chaos, right? This is paradoxical. But that plays into the paradoxical mindset of the speaker or our protagonist and all of his alters, and the fact that he's trying to disseminate chaos inside of an already seemingly chaotic society. I mean, his society, the way that he lives inside of what he sees in society is complete chaos, barraging and blitzing him all the time, but it's obviously organized. So the only way for him, he thinks, to fight this is to destroy everything and bring it back. Tyler, he states that later on in the book that Tyler does not care about human lives or the cost. It doesn't matter. The only thing that they care about is the effect of these things and the attention that it gets and the counter aesthetic terror that it's bringing to society. And also, he doesn't care about human lives because we know he's not human. That the more the altars start to proliferate, the more that lives are going to be sacrificed as part of their sort of neo-paramilitary Ordo Abcayo group, if that makes sense. So he doesn't care about life. And obviously, there are things that we like when we read this book or watch this movie because, for instance, the Fight Club itself. The Fight Club itself is pretty cool, right? I mean, they're bare knuckle brawling. The fellas are getting together, and this is a human long traditional way that people either solve problems or did physical activity, especially in military settings. It's also quite common, it's quite common in a society without weapons, or without guns. I mean, I used to see this. Okay, here's what I mean by that. In this country, one of the things that happens is obviously that when people get in arguments, they will do anything to say or to use a vehicle or to try to get their point across and to seem, strong or powerful. But the minute that they're tested man to man, they can't accept it. Or if they do accept it, they then take it on into something lethal past that. So they're unable to accept taking one of the things about being a man, I think, is your knowledge that in life, occasionally, sometime throughout life, you're going to have to take a beating, and it's your ability to not be a little that allows you to grow as a human being, because remember Mike Tyson talking about this? Let's take Mike Tyson as the extreme example. Mike Tyson, in that one bit, talked about, remember when they asked him if you could fight anybody in the whole world, who would it be? And he said Achilles, which I think is like the most insanely awesome poetical analysis answer you could possibly give, because he didn't ask about this time frame. He just asked as a person. So he picks the mythical demigod that he would fight, because and the reason he said that was because he said he realized at one point that he could fight anybody in the world and he could win, right? That there was nobody left to fight. And that is, in his experience, what he expressed was that was the thing that brought him back down to being a human being. Because when there was nobody left to fight, he realized he was fighting himself the whole time. He was fighting his past, fighting his history, fighting abuse, fighting all those things. And so that's what brought him back to himself. So there's always somebody else, but you got to be able to take it, right? It's kind of like, in a way, the first step of that is, getting when you're a kid, when you're hanging with the fellas and one of your friends, gives you a cut down. One of the tests of being a man, and this has kind of disappeared obviously over the years, but it used to be that when one of your friends cuts you down or insults you, you have to be able to give it right back. That's the test. And then everything's fine. Or that if you get into it with one of your friends, when it's over, it's fine. It's fine. It just happened and it's fine. It doesn't have to keep carrying on. It's either a draw or you win, lose, or draw. It's going to be one of those three things. So that's obviously appealing about Fight Club. But the reason that this thing is deceptive and slightly insidious, I don't think he wrote it for this reason. I think that this is predictive and it's revelatory and it's a kind of also a satirical reflection of the way society certainly was going at the time, but he never had any idea that I think that it would be this far, is that when you start to supplant your religion and meaning with your will, with your personal will, you're bound to go wrong. And that's what happens in this thing. And it ends up being this is the same thing that Bateman goes through, in a sense, this kind of psychopathic worldview it's American Psycho, where you remember the scene in American Psycho where in the book, just to paraphrase, where he's like at the U2 concert and he sees Bono singing right into his eyes and he gets utterly disgusted. He looks into the sky and he sees a red mist rising and he says, paraphrase, that he wishes the red mist would wash the earth in blood and that every single person would disappear, that the world would evaporate. That's almost the exact same thing that the speaker in this goes through. He wants everybody in the world to go. He wants it all to be destroyed. And that's the extension of that. So that's obviously ego death. That leads to death of the world, death of himself, into absolute obliteration. And one of the things that Tyler brings up actually is that he says that because they have no father figures, they have no religion, right? And that the worst thing, he says, if you ever thought about maybe the fact that, they're not loved, that they're hated, and that the worst thing is not to be damned, he says, but to be obliterated, to be nothing. So that obviously is the kind of dangerous worldview that is appealing to many people without discernment, but is ultimately destructive. I think that's, I never take moral lessons from books of prose like this. They're not for us to get moral lessons and to determine our worldview. They give us a reflection of that. They give us something to add to Seamus Heaney's rattle bag, and they give us things to look for and to do and to not do. But you have to be equipped with a proper worldview and discernment and what it means to, your morals don't come from the book Fight Club, in other words, right? And the book essentially is showing you that supplanting your system of morality with the thought that you can become your own God is obviously destructive. But within that, there are things that are appealing. Not that lead all the way to this, but that are appealing. A more masculine society, people who are willing to fight for what they believe in. I mean, those things are important. The fact that, people live a kind of drone life, walking around the office, wake up, go to work, eat, go home, go to sleep. Wake up, eat, go to work, go to sleep. That same thing is obviously part of this thing that the modern and the postmodern world has given us that's very hard to escape. You got to make money. You got to, you got to feed yourself, feed your family. You want to enjoy life while you can, but you can't simply, you can't think that it's going to be throwing all that out the window in terms of destruction and order from chaos. I mean, order from chaos is something that the top down wants to accomplish that has the means to do that. The bottom up, is kind of a fleeting thought here. So anyway, let's see. The chapter 18, the house / building as psyche again. This Friday night, I fall asleep at my desk at work. When I wake up with my face and my crossed arms on my desktop, the telephone's ringing and everyone is gone. He's come back to his baseline 0 line altar again here, himself from his altar. A telephone was ringing in my dream, and it's not clear if reality slipped into my dream or if my dream is slopping over into reality. I answer the phone. Compliance and liability. The sun is going down, and piled up storm clouds the size of Wyoming and Japan are headed our way. This is a very American Psycho, Brad Easton Ellis type of writing here. It's not like I have a window at work. All the outside walls are floor-to-ceiling glass. Everything where I work is floor-to-ceiling glass. Everything is vertical blinds. Everything is industrial, low-pile gray carpet spotted with little tombstone monuments where the PCs plug into the network. Everything is a maze of cubicles boxed in with fences of upholstered plywood. A vacuum cleaner hums somewhere. My boss has gone on vacation. He sent me an email and then disappeared. I'm to prepare for a formal review in 2 weeks, reserve a conference room, get all my ducks in a row, update my resume, that sort of thing. They're building a case against me. I am Joe's complete lack of surprise. I've been behaving miserably. I pick up the phone and it's Tyler, and he says, go outside. There's some guys waiting for you in the parking lot. So obviously the building here and the maze of cubicles is the labyrinthine mind, right? He's now completely permeated with corporate labyrinthine techno structure that has taken the place of any sort of real life or feeling. Spiritual warfare and culture war takes place on page 149. Project Mayhem. I see the strongest and smartest men who have ever lived, says Tyler, his face outlined against the stars in the driver's window, and these men are pumping gas and waiting tables. You have a class of strong men and women, and they want to give their lives to something. Advertising has these people chasing cars and clothes they don't need. Generations have been working in jobs they hate just so they can buy what they don't really need. Well, that's fine. That's good. I mean, he's right there. We don't have a great war in our generation or a Great Depression, but we do have a great war of the spirit. We have a great revolution against culture. The Great Depression is our lives. We have a spiritual depression. He's absolutely right. It's just that he goes in the wrong direction with it. But he's absolutely right about that. Right? But it takes the individual to understand that and to find his way rather than the group to tell him, because it just becomes another group that supplants that. Unless it's a group based in proper religion or family unit, right? He explains D.I.D. on pages 167 and 168. He says, every time we do these little homework assignments, Tyler says, these Fight Club men with nothing to lose are a little more invested in Project Mayhem. Tyler, kneeling next to my bed, says, close your eyes and give me your hand. I close my eyes and Tyler takes my hand. I feel Tyler's lips against the scar of his kiss. There you go with your Skittles. I said do you get it? That's also love of the self. That's love of self that will result in destruction of the self. Not a good love of the self here, by the way. I said that if you talked with me behind my back, you'd never see me again. We're not two separate men. Long story short, when you're awake, you have control, and you can call yourself anything you want. But the second you fall asleep, I take over, and you become Tyler Durden. It's interesting the staging of this in the book, because it's almost like Tyler Durden is on his knees praying to himself, who is his own God, in the altar of his bed. But we fought, I say, the night we invented Fight Club. You weren't really fighting me, Tyler said. You said so yourself. You were fighting everything you hate in your life. But I can see you. You're asleep, but you're renting a house. You hold a job. 2 jobs. Tyler says, order your canceled checks from the bank. I rented the house in your name. I think you'll find the handwriting on the rent check matches the notes you've been typing for me. Tyler's been spending my money. It's no wonder I'm always overdrawn. And the jobs, well, why do you think you're so tired? Geez, it's not insomnia. As soon as you fall asleep, I take over and go to work on Fight Club or whatever. You're lucky I didn't get a job as a snake handler. I say, but what about Marla? Marla loves you. Marla loves you. Marla doesn't know the difference between you and me. You gave her a fake name the night you met. You never gave your real name in a support group, you inauthentic shit. Since I saved her life, Marla thinks your name is Tyler Durden. So now that I know about Tyler, will he just disappear? No, Tyler says, still holding my hand. I wouldn't be here in the first place if you didn't want me. I'll still live my life while you're asleep, but if you fuck with me, if you chain yourself to the bed at night or take big doses of sleeping pills, then we'll be enemies, and I'll get you for it. Oh, this is bullshit. This is a dream. Tyler's a projectionist. He's a dissociative personality disorder, a psychogenic fugue state. Tyler Durden is my hallucination. Fuck that shit, Tyler says. Maybe you're my schizophrenic hallucination. I was here first, Tyler says. Yeah. Well, let's just see who's here last. This isn't real. This is a dream, and I'll wake up. Then wake up. And then the telephone's ringing, and Tyler's gone. Sun is coming through the curtains. It's 7 a.m. wake-up call, and when I wake up and pick up the receiver, the line is dead. That's a callback to when Marla was talking about, almost in a necromantic spirit, about the fact that when she speaks to the dead, and when she picks up the telephone, she speaks to the other side, she hears voices calling from the other side, and when they call her on the telephone, she picks it up, the line is dead. Because she's speaking to the dead. She's speaking to the dead within herself. She's speaking to the other side. All these characters are constantly flirting with death. And then we have let's see. There's a split altar on page 196. This says, why does my life need saving? Because you've been following me, because you followed me tonight, because you saw Tyler Durden kill someone, and Tyler will kill anybody who threatens Project Mayhem. Everybody in the room looks snapped out of their little tragedies, their little cancer thing. Even the people on pain meds look wide-eyed and alert. I say to the crowd, I'm sorry. I never meant to any harm. We should go. We should talk about this outside. Everybody goes, no, stay. What else? I didn't kill anybody, I say. I'm not Tyler Durden. He's the other side of my split personality, I say. Has anybody here seen the movie Sybil? Interesting, because we think of the movie Sybil, but also Sybil Leak. Remember, Sybil Leak was, I think that was MK Ultra Project 119, MK Often, right, where CIA incorporated Sybil Leak, the notorious witch, into creating altars for monarch mind control. Marla says, who's going to kill me? Tyler. You? Tyler, I say, but I can take care of Tyler. You just have to watch out for the members of Project Mayhem. Tyler might have given them orders to follow you or kidnap you or something. Why should I believe any of this? It happens that fast. I say, because I think I like you. Marla says, not love. This is a cheesy enough moment. I say, don't push it. Everybody watching smiles. I have to go out. I have to go out of here. I say, watch out for guys with shaved heads or guys who look beat up, black eyes, missing teeth, that sort of thing. And Marla says, so where are you going? I have to take care of Tyler Durden. And at the end here, Tyler says, oh, Tyler, I hurt. Just kill me here. Get up. Kill me already. Kill me, kill me, kill me, kill me. Which is a lot like King Lear. Remember, never, 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 never. It has to be big. I also think of the movie The Prestige. Remember, I covered The Prestige, the book and the movie, the Christopher Nolan movie, where that's a form of externalized D.I.D. We actually get two characters in that, but we think, but they're playing a game as if they're one. So it's an externalized D.I.D. instead of one character who doesn't know that he's two characters with two separate lives. It has to be big, Tyler says. Picture this. You on top of the world's tallest building, the whole building taken over by Project Mayhem. Smoke rolling out the windows, desks falling into the crowds on the street. A real opera of death. That's what you're going to get. And that is, essentially, that is Fight Club. Now, the end of Fight Club the book actually ends with him in heaven. And he's gotten rid of, the movie ends with him getting rid of Tyler Durden. And he's now himself, but he's obviously perishing. And then we see the buildings fall and we see the Big Nine projection outside the window. The windows, again, he's looking out of his own psyche out into the world, escaping the labyrinth of himself, looking outside. Everything's destroyed just like he's being destroyed on the inside. And Yakin and Boaz are falling here. But the book ends differently. It ends with him at peace because the character actually wishes to get out of all this because his alters now are at war with him. It's kind of the final stage of Fight Club, and he wishes for absolute peace. Instead of obliteration, he wishes for peace and grace. So it has a different ending than the movie. But that is Fight Club, you guys. Was that okay? Was that a fairly decent and quick? I say quick. I mean, that's probably a better analysis than you're going to get in most analyses of the book anywhere else. But was that a pretty, comprehensive analysis of Fight Club and its meaning? I think so. I mean, tell me what you think. There's Fight Club. Chuck Palahniuk, check it out. That's the book. Go check out the movie. It's David Fincher. And and listen, shouts out to all the members out there. Listen again, if you want to support me, I would really appreciate it. I've got a bunch of books that I need to pick up. And one of those is it's interesting how we started off not wanting to do any Stephen King, and then I did Firestarter. That kind of led into Misery. Misery did pretty well, and I want to do Cujo. That's a sponsored stream, so I'm going to add Cujo to that. I've never read Cujo, so I need to get that. When he beats up Jared Leto in the movie, in the book, he's called Angel Face, and there is a little Skittles thing going on here, but he's also he beats him to a pulp. The narrator actually fights finally in the book, and we see him fighting, and he beats up Jared Leto, Angel Face, because he's trying to destroy. He launches into how he wants to destroy anything beautiful. He says he wants to destroy the Mona Lisa, destroy art, destroy buildings, destroy everything that he ever thought was beautiful, because this is a symbol of him being completely destroyed. I see the breaking news right there about Joe Biden. I'm not really interested in that right now, but I just saw it. And obviously check out DPH, because I was on there, Church of the Eternal Logos, a couple of nights ago, talking about the big capital E event the other night. So that was cool. Shouts out to our brother DPH. I've got a stream coming up in a couple of weeks. I'll be doing the Parallax View with Jay. And this is pretty obviously relevant to the events that are happening now. But we're going to keep on doing our literary and book analysis, of course. Yeah, Egon says that you dislike the book Cujo, interested in your take. Yeah, I haven't read it, so I'll check it out. I mean, I was so surprised by Misery, the book, and its complexity. I was really surprised by that. That's not in the canon of literature, but that's okay, because it kind of works in parallel, or certainly works as a prerequisite for other works that we've read. And besides, it's in the canon of horror, and so we'll be doing that. Can you guys believe? I mean, it's July. It'll be spooky season before we know it. I mean, I like summer. Not that I'm here to talk about the weather, but you guys know me. My ideal day is like 54 to 57 degrees, overcast and raining in Northern Ireland or in Virginia. That's my ideal day. I love the rain. I love the dark. I love overcast. I kind of, when I wake up in the morning and the sun is shining, oh yeah, I'm thankful, of course, but I also kind of go, ugh. That's why I can never live in California. But it'll be spooky season before we know it, and we're gonna have a lot coming for spooky season this year. I mean, I've added to the playlist. If you want to see the long legs analysis, I just did that. Please go back and watch the Maxine analysis I did the other night. I also watched the Bike Riders yesterday, which is directed by the Mud guy, the guy who directed Mud that I just did on the Matthew McConaughey stream. I think is that also in Members? I think that's also in Members. That's an original movie. I look forward to more movies coming out. By the way, that's one of the phrases. That's one of the drink now phrases they used in the last thing. In the debates. When Nosferatu comes out around Christmas time, I'll obviously be covering that, because I did the Dracula analysis. I'll probably do Shadow of the Vampire before then. Maybe go back to Dracula a little bit. The text, Bram Stoker text, we covered that. I've covered Frankenstein. I've covered all those. So I'll definitely be covering that. So if you want to check those out, look at the links in the video description. Find some others that relate to this. We've done a bunch. Clockwork Orange relates to this, obviously. White Noise even relates to this. The Prestige relates to Fight Club. So go back and check those out. Check out the Maxine analysis again. I probably won't do a full analysis of the Bike Riders until I reread the Sonny Barger autobiography and the Hells Angels book by Hunter S. Thompson. I've done the Generation of Swine and Doom Generation from Hunter S. Thompson. And also, I even talked about the biography of Hunter S. Thompson done by the lady that sued the former Prez. Remember? I'm probably E. Jean Carroll. She wrote that book, and I covered it. And that's probably the only. Am I the only guy who's read that book? Probably, I guess. So you can go back and check out that stream if you want. Let's get some super chats in here, you guys. Let me check out some support here. If you want to grab a membership, you can. I appreciate that. Let's check out some super chats. Hey, shouts out to Rob, who donated $5 again last night. And let's see. And said, excited to hear you'll be analyzing Fight Club tonight. I'll have to catch the stream later. But what do you think of the theory that Fight Club and Office Space are essentially the same movie, just from different perspectives on what it means to totally let go, keep slaying? Hey, look, that's a great question, and thank you for that $5 super chat, Rob. Yeah, I mentioned that at the beginning of the stream. Yo, Maddie also read the E.G. and Carroll book. That's crazy. So you've got two people in our circle here who have read that book. That's crazy. That's awesome, Maddie. And I do think that they certainly function as something that was really popular in the 90s, this kind of war on the office. Then we get kind of rehab with that, with the show The Office and the English Office. But certainly Office Space is a fantastic movie. That's a classic movie, really well written. And you know, playing the Ghetto Boys, right? Then we triple beamed on him. So I think that's a good point. Thank you for that super chat. This one obviously has a more of a spiritual dimension to it, or a pseudo spiritual dimension. Shouts out to Buster, who who drops. Let's see, Buster drops $10 on Venmo. Thank you so much, Buster. Really appreciate that. Shouts out to Real John Connor, who sent $5 and said they should have made the whole plane out of Bob's tits. That's a Norm joke. Shouts out to Real John Connor right there, and also shouts out Real John Connor supported last night also. And what if they made the whole plane out of Trump's ear? Okay. Shouts out to Real John Connor. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Shouts out to Jason, of course. Jason drops $15 on PayPal. Thank you so much, Jason. Really appreciate that. Let's see. If you want to support, let me look at this right here and see if we, let me give some more shouts out. Shouts out to Chase Nelson for grabbing a membership. Really appreciate that. Andrew Turner is a high IQ book enjoyer. Shouts out to you guys. Shouts out to Luchador, who dropped those $10 in super chats. Thank you. The last thing I'll say is that if you want to sponsor a stream, you can drop $100. That's $100 for my time for me to do all the coverage, a whole stream on whatever you well, not whatever you want, but the ideas that you throw me through an email, madmaximalism at 2x's with 2x's at gmail.com. And you should do that through PayPal, Cash App, or Venmo. Shouts out to Jethro right there for that $10. Where is my mind? Where is my mind? Closing time. That's not the same song, but shouts out to Jethro for that $10. Where is my mind? Of course, the closing of Fight Club. Thank you, Jethro. Really appreciate that. Hey, shouts out to Jason, who gifted one membership. Really appreciate that. The last thing I'll say, I'm not going to do a full analysis right now of this book, Celine's Journey to the End of the Night. But again, I mentioned this last night, that this book had been on my mind for a long time because of I got the idea for it through reading about Jim Morrison when I was in 7th grade. and the End of the Night, Take the Highway to the End of the Night, Take the Highway to the Bright Midnight. And that is directly from Celine and, of course, from William Blake. I'll be doing a William Blake stream coming up. But Celine's book is actually a kind of companion to Fight Club because of the war on the self and the war on others with this kind of nihilistic spirit. This is an extremely modernist book. It's 1932, and it's actually a great read. This is a fantastic book. It's a classic. It's French. I read the English translation, but it's fantastic. So just basically, just real quick, what happens in the book is the speaker survives his combat in World War I, and of course it's World War I because we get T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, we get The Valley of Ashes with F. Scott Fitzgerald, both of which I've covered, but also World War I is, again, the physical symbol of the broken landscape of society, the psyche, and even of people's spirituality in the modernist era by design. And this is not postmodern, this is purely modernism. And so what the character does is the speaker realizes that he hates war, he hates society, and that it's actually his own side, the French, that are more of a threat to him in World War I. He never sees the Germans on the horizon. He says that he sees villages and he sees fire like a flower. A village takes all night to burn. That's on page 23. And he watches villages burn. Shouts out to Orthodox Christian right there for Orthodox Christian B right there for that $5 donation. No comment. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And that his own people are getting shot and killed by his own, it's all quiet on the Western Front, but almost without the contact with the other side. So afterwards, Heart of Darkness style, he gets on a boat. He's a doctor. He's a physician. He gets on a boat and he takes it to as far away as he can. He goes to Africa. And while he's on the boat, this is almost Melville Confidence Man style. He's on the boat and realizes that instead of everybody else being a confidence man, that he is seen as the con man. And the reason is because he's the only person on the boat who paid for his ticket. Everybody else is a former soldier, and they were given these tickets, so they think that he's got something to hide. They start making up rumors about him until he does this really brilliant thing, which is so relevant now, where they pull him aside. They're about to kill him on this boat, and he says, you think that I've been talking about the troops? Of course I would never talk about the troops. The troops are stunning and brave, and I'm one of them. And he gives this long speech, the longest speech that he gives outright in the book, about how, the stunning and brave warriors and the troops, you got to support the troops. And everybody thinks that he's an ultra jingoistic patriot at this point, whereas he really hates the war and hates everything about his culture and everything. So he goes to Africa. He sees utter degradation and he just hates everyone. Then he gets on a boat and he goes to America, and he ends up in New York. Then he ends up working in a Ford factory in Detroit, and then eventually makes his way back to Paris, where he becomes a practicing doctor until one of his friends ends up trying to con him. He cons a woman. They con each other until the guy gets unalived by a woman, and sort of his viewpoint at the end is that sort of life to him is meaningless. Now, that's not why I'm saying you should read the book, obviously, because you can read the book without buying into the things in the book. The reason you should read the book is because it sets up the stage for modernity and postmodernity, and especially the postmodern Great Reset era that we live in now, that is kind of unlike many other books that I've read because it's so funny. It's so funny the way that he does this. And the thing that he loves, he's actually looking for Nub in all the Wong paces throughout the book, and he finds this character Molly, and Molly not Molly. Is it Molly? He finds a character. Now I've read 7 books since then, so I can't remember the Mollys. There's a Molly in something I just read. Is it this? Anyway. But he says here, this is quite beautiful. He says the sunsets in that African hell proved to be fabulous. They never missed, as tragic every time as a monumental murder of the sun. But the marvel was too great for one man alone. For a whole hour, the sky paraded in great delirious spurts of scarlet from end to end, and after that, the green of the trees exploded and rose up in quivering trails to meet the first stars. Then the whole horizon turned gray again, and then red, but this time a tired red that didn't last long. That was the end. All the colors fell back down into the forest in tatters, like streamers after the 100th performance. It happened every day at 6 o'clock, which is, we often get that as a hallmark of great literature. There are scenes about the sky. Remember the scene in The Thin Red Line, whatever the phrase is, Ilios Iactylos, I read Homer, at the point, in Greek. Remember? Nature's cruel, stalls. See those vines twisting around everything, everywhere? Well, it also starts off, this is the start of the Iliad. We get this with Rosy Finger Dawn. You get this in American Psycho, but it's the inverse with the blood red sheen of a curtain of scarlet mist falling over the whole world. We get what's he saying? Much Ado About Nothing. He says, the gentle wheels of Phoebus roundabout dapples the drowsy east with spots of gray. And then at the end of this, he says, at the end of this part, he says, but I found nothing, no answer. You can lose your way groping among the shadows of the past. It's frightening how many people and things there are in a man's past that have stopped moving. The living people we've lost in the crypts of time sleep so soundly side by side with the dead that the same darkness envelops them all. I found that particularly poignant because, especially with growing older, one of the things that I realize now is that many people, I've talked about this before, but many people my age their memories get supplanted with their new experiences, especially with their family, and they call me the memory keeper. They call me the keeper of memories. They call me the shadow master. They call me photo memory. They call me hyperthymesia. No, I mean, my memories are so vivid throughout my entire life, and time is a strange thing just on personal reflection because everybody who's ever lived died. We're all going to go, but we get to a point in life where it seems like we've lived multiple lives. Like our life is so distant from us 20 years ago, for instance, than it is now, but it's the same life and we're the same person. But many people forget those experiences, and I think that one of the really strange and sad things about life is that, I'm about to be 44 years old, and I feel like I was 24 a second ago, but I have whole groups of friends that I knew abroad and that I lived with for years, or friends that I've met along the way, and when they go, it's very hard to get them back, and you feel like they are lost in the crypts and tombs of time, that they'll never be there again. But they are. Many of them are still living. But there's a sadness. There's a not really a sadness. There's a melancholy aspect to that because that's what happens in life to every person. So I found that particular passage in this book really quite metaphysical in a way that is showing me that in the book, the speaker has a nihilistic, hateful viewpoint of everyone and everything, but it's not quite like Camus in The Stranger. I covered The Stranger. I've read Camus' Rebel also, but it's not quite that. It's not quite Sartre. It's not pure existentialism. It's not that well, there's nothing else to do but just keep on living or whatever, which is actually not the end result of that. It's actually that he's clearly the journey to the end of the night is clearly him looking for the end of the shadows that are cast on his life and for lightness. He wants to find grace. He just doesn't quite know how to find it. Crystalline says, Hendo never went through those years and years without sleep when the kids are little and you turn into a zombie robot on autopilot has a tendency to wipe your memory. No, Kristen, I totally get that. That's a great comment. Because, I mean, that's kind of what I was referring to, that I don't have kids, and so there's a clear difference between, just from my viewpoint, objectively about all my friends that do, people that have lived their lives and now they have a life of their own that grew outside of them. It's a reflection of them, and that's their children. So it's obvious that that's almost like two sets of memories that you're taking on, and one gets supplanted by the other. But I think for any person, we sort of experience those things, and so that's a great point, Crystalline. And by the way, Crystalline is the one that I defer to when we're talking in the new political conversation about the candidate from Ohio. That's the first thing I thought of, Crystalline, when I heard that. I thought it's the first thing I thought of. I actually have J.D. Vance's book, and I haven't read it, so I guess I'll read it. It's been at the bottom of a huge stack of books. Forgot I even had it. So shouts out to Rachel right there, Rachel Wilson, based homeschool mama, Rachel for Patriarchy, our good friend. So you guys want me to read that book? I should probably do a dual stream of the J.D. Vance book and the Prince Harry book. I've been talking about that Prince Harry book for a while. So if you want to super chat, you want to PayPal, you want to get me those donos in, so that I can get that Prince Harry book, because I know that I don't want to say none of y'all are going to read it. It's not that it's you. I just don't think people are going to read it. They haven't read it so far. And if you want somebody to read it, because I've read excerpts and it's pretty wild. By the way, Prince Harry also talks about seeing the red mist spray across his visage when he was in the war with the Gurkhas. There's a scene in the book that I know that happened. So I think it would be, I've heard some other excerpts that's pretty spicy and pretty wild. So it might be interesting to cover that. If you want to support me, you can do that. I'll also cover the J.D. Vance book if you want me to. It's called Hillbilly Elegy. Again, I've had it somebody gave it to me a long time ago. And I've had it. When I saw his name pop up, I thought, I got his book. Isn't it interesting? We live in a time where this guy is the nominee and Wes Moore is in Maryland, wrote the other Wes Moore, the book. We got a couple of authors. It's just an interesting thing. Yeah, no, Kristen, he never saw comment, did he? Well, he claims that he did in the book, and that there's a thing about Gurkhas lining up people for him so that he can get his let's say John Rambo on that's what he describes in the book. So it's pretty crazy. So yeah, if you want to sponsor stream, you can drop $100 and get me to do movies. I got to do the Ghost in the Darkness and the Beast streams. I got to do Cosmopolis by Don DeLeo, and the film is coming up. I'll be doing Billy Bob Thornton. I'll be doing Perfect Blue. I'll be doing a bunch of other ones. There's a bunch of things that I haven't forgotten you. If you got Nightmare Alley's a sponsor stream. So I think that's about it. That's about it. That's probably a pretty good analysis of Celine. One thing he says about Proust, he talks about Marcel Proust in this. And he says, Proust, who was half a ghost, immersed himself with extraordinary tenacity in the infinitely, hold on, let me find, I can't read my writing here. Proust, who was half a ghost, immersed himself with extraordinary tenacity in the infinitely watery futility of the rites and procedures that entwine the members of high society, whose denizens of the void, those phantoms of desire, those irresolute daisy chainers still waiting for their Watteau, those listless seekers after implausible Cythereases. And so what he's talking about here is that's a perfect description of Proust. If you've ever read Proust and Henry James both do this. I don't like the fin de siècle writers for the most part, because, especially Henry James, because they immerse themselves in the daily lives of these phantasms of the void, as he calls it, which is a perfect description. I think that's a pretty biting description that he gives. And nothing remained but shimmering dread, he says. So that's Celine. That's Ferdinand Celine, who was a Vichy doctor during the war, during the Big Dubs Part Duh. So that is Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk, and that is Celine. I'm also going to be diving into this book that my pops just sent me. This is called Dark Quadrant. This is Organized Crime, Big Business, and the Corruption of American Democracy. So I'll be reading that soon. If you want to see the drone stream that I just did on drone warfare, I'll be reading The Two Lives of Charlemagne coming up. Charlemagne. I've met Charlemagne, the Breakfast Club guy. He was very not like he is. I was talking about this with somebody recently. I think it was Mick, maybe. I met him at a party at the iHeartRadio Festival. My friend was a big time guy doing something, and Charlemagne came up to my buddy and said, "Hello, Mr. Wood. How are you doing?" And he was not at all like he was on the radio, and he was not to say that he's. I don't know about breakfast. I don't know about any of that. Whatever. All I'm saying is when I met him, he was very kind and very sweet. But we're talking about the Two Lives of Charlemagne. The Frankish Charlemagne. What else? Bunch of stuff I got to cover here. So that's about it. I think that'll do it for us. Oh, that was Maddie that I was talking to about that. Yeah, so you guys make sure you check out my recent appearances I did on Burmis, on Johnny Vedmore, on Joseph Arthur. You can find links. I usually put those links in Instagram in the stories or in the community tab. I'm trying to do better about putting those links up every time. Also, check me out on TNT Radio Live, maybe on Boiler Room tomorrow night. Alternate Current Radio. Check out, again, I'll be doing the Parallax View with Jay coming up. I got the Jurassic Park with Jamie coming up. And much more stuff. So check that out. Please make sure you give this a watch, give it a rewatch. Smash that like, share the stream, and I think that'll about do us for tonight, you guys. Thanks for stopping by. Really appreciate you. Let's go strong. Let's go strong into summer, right? Was it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it if you're strong enough. All right, we're gonna go hard through the rest of the summer, straight into fall. Let's do that, and let's listen to some Rooks G here. I'm gonna take us out with Sting. I'm gonna cut off his new album, which is Rooks G Ice Glide. All right, we do it live here. We do it live. Thanks everybody. Thank you for being here. Thanks to all the mods. Thank you to all my friends. Thank you to everybody who super chatted, donated. You can continue to do that anytime. You can hit me up on madmaximalism with 2x's at gmail.com. You can send PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, and Super Chats. And you can just hit me up, follow me on Instagram, follow me here. And that's about it. You guys, love y'all. Peace. This is our guy. Thank you to all the night riders out there, night crawlers, special beings, PBR Street Gang, almighty, high IQ book enjoyers, Bazed, breathalyzers,